it's not enforced and it's not a priority for their administration, it's not going to be complied with, and that's what we're seeing throughout Ohio. Thank you.
John, when you talk about the state regulations being stricter than federal regulations, are you suggesting that Ohio's regulations should be no stricter than federal regulations?
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to the EPA, I mean, when you start imposing rules that are tougher than the federal EPA, you go out and talk to business people. One of their big problems is being able to comply with federal EPA. And businesses in this state are absolutely petrified of these potential cap and trade type bills that'll come. You know, if they pass a thing like cap and trade, we won't have to worry about jobs in Ohio. There won't be any people living here. We'll all have moved. The economy will be sucked out and shifted to the coast. So, no, I think that we know that federal regs are very stringent. Sometimes they lack common sense. But for Ohio to have tougher rules and laws, particularly as it applies to a great operation like Timken, makes no sense at all. Absolutely. Our rules ought to be more flexible and more manageable than what they send us out of Washington. If there's anything that people are saying today, give us some relief from all the rules and the power of the federal government. 10th Amendment, that's what Bob Dole used to run around, hold it, 10th Amendment. Nobody knew what it was, but he was ahead of his time. It was not a strong campaign message, but yes, sir, Joe.
The theme here might be perceived as businesses are always right, regulators are always wrong.
Well, nobody should think that way. That's not what we're saying. Look, you need health and safety rules. But when people do not design these rules using common sense to meet common objectives so that people are working, I mean, let's just take a business in downtown Westerville. If the attitude is we're in charge, you do it our way, and there's no flexibility, you kill the business. So nobody is suggesting for a second that we don't need really good health and safety. But if you do not design your rules in such a way that you help companies to comply so it fosters economic growth, you can shut the businesses down and you lose jobs. I mean, it's like this permitting process. We're filling out paperwork to many duplicative agencies. No one's suggesting that you don't have to register. No one is suggesting for a second that that you don't have to comply. But let's do it, Joe, in a common sense way. And that's the thing that I think people want in our country. It's not like we don't want to have clean water, clean air, or not good safety. But I can tell you that a lot of businesses, take Worthington Industries, they've launched a big safety program. You know what? They know that if their workers are safe, that they get lower workers' comp charges, they get lower insurance. I mean, they don't want the workers to be injured. They just want common sense applied to them. That's all that this is about. And transparency for the consumer as well. Yeah.
One question for the General Assembly members. I think you both represent Grand Lake St. Mary's. If during the 12 years that Republicans controlled everything, proper regulations had been put in place, might that lake not be dead now?
I'm going to tell you the answer is no. And I'm not going to make this a Republican-Democrat issue. I'm going to make this an important issue to recognize where we're going for change. As you might recall, those of you who have been around following the General Assembly since I've been there, when I came to the General Assembly 8 years ago, one of my first topics was regulatory reform. And that was under a Republican administration. I proposed regulatory reform bills when Republicans controlled the governor's office. And I served as chairman of JCAR when Republicans controlled the governor's office. I think most of them will tell you, and most of you who followed it, was that I was not soft on Republicans who run agencies. I was soft on hard on agency bureaucrats who didn't do common sense things. Let's talk about Grand Lake St. Mary's for a second. Grand Lake St. Mary's has a lot of issues. One of those issues is certainly that we have an issue associated with the livestock and the farming in the south side of the lake, and the regulatory standards associated with that. There has been a transformation on what's expected of farmers to meet best practices. And Representative Zehringer, who's a farmer, can probably testify or tell you better as to what those things mean. But I still believe today that Ohio ODNR and Ohio EPA have regulatory authority to enforce some of the bad actors and some of the problems on Grand Lake St. Mary's and some of the livestock issues associated with that. But Grand Lake St. Mary's problems aren't just what you've seen in the last 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Arguably with the best practices in the farm community that have been implemented in the last few years, the water quality problem is better. What you have, though, is literally 150 plus years of phosphorus loading going into that lake from an ag history and an ag practice that has accumulated because the lake does not flush. It does not flow. And I can talk about Grand Lake St. Mary's, but John, I don't want to get off that track today. But effectively, I don't view this as a Republican-Democrat issue. I view this as an Ohio issue, and let's get this fixed for the future.
Well, you know, I was just down at a meeting at the Grand Lake St. Mary's where they just told me that the regulators came down, met with them, left town, they got nothing out of it. Talked to the group down there. Nobody, you know, I'll give you a good example of common sense, Joe. They're talking about putting some sort of wind turbine up in Lake Erie in a spawning area. Not if I'm governor. If there's a spawning area that helps the fishing industry in Lake Erie work, I know some people that fish up there at Lake Erie once a year. They're not going to put windmill. That's just dumb. If the facts of that hold to be true, that isn't going to happen. We're going to fight it. For example, you know, we got an Asian carp problem up in Lake Erie. It threatens to destroy the lake. We're not going to put up with that. So solid, common sense thing. There's nobody that would say you want to let Asian carp get into Lake Erie. Destroy the fishing industry, destroy one of our great assets. That's not the point. It's the lack of common sense that we can go through and give you chapter and verse. Just go out in the street and talk to the guy that's the donut shop guy. See, my vision is, at some point, we'll probably create a task force, and I'll tell you who's going to be on it. Painters, electricians, donut shop owners, the people every day who have to fight against this blizzard of rules and regulations that drive them crazy. So let's not be confused about it. But you know, when DNR and EPA go down there, I met with a private group of people. They were in there and they heard it. I don't know if they'll tell you because they don't want to make the bureaucrats mad. They didn't get any help. No answer. No nothing. And we're going to clean Grand Lake St. Mary's. It has to be dealt with. It's a great asset in our state. So,
John, if I can just follow up one more thing. Nobody in this entire presentation today have said we don't need any regulations. I still believe that we need regulations with regard to clean air, clean water, healthy, safe workplaces, and other areas. The key is, can you do it effectively with common sense? You know, everybody I've talked to, getting back to Grand Lake St. Mary's, has said, one, we have the tools. 3 or 4 years ago, Representative Zehringer and I came up with a proposal of legislative issues to give additional authority. What we were told by Soil and Water and ODNR and other folks is they had the tools. They could do chief's orders to effectually do what we were talking about doing. The problem is they haven't done it. And then the problem is when they go to the next step, how they're applying that. In the long run, again, you've got the majority of farmers in the watershed meeting compliance or trying to meet compliance. It's a few bad actors. And we'll take care of that, and we'll continue to work on that. And if we need more regulations or targeted regulations with common sense to get there, we can do that. But at the end of the day, you don't get there with this.
yeah, absolutely right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Kasich, you're ringing this bell about common sense. You have all these promises that you told the voters that that are going to happen when you become governor. Following up with the windmill turbine that's going in that they're talking about in Lake Erie, ODOT just announced today that they're going to apply for a federal government loan for the Tiger II discretionary fund for like $20.2 million to build a station in downtown Columbus. You said that
This is for the passenger rail.
yes, and you said if you become governor that you're not going to.
Let me say a couple things. First of all, the 39-mile-an-hour high-speed train is dead when I become governor. And by the way, as it relates to other Republicans or whatever, there's a new sheriff